Good morning, County Council. I would now like to call to order this County Council meeting of July 24th, 2025. At this point in time, as you are able, please join us in the standing and singing of O Canada.
Our home and nation, O Canada, our home and native land. True patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you please conduct our roll call? Councillor Mackey.
Present.
Councillor McKay. Councillor Carlton. Councillor Pringle. Councillor McQueen is absent at this time. Councillor Nielsen. Councillor Patterson. Councillor Dickert. Councillor Kentner. Councillor Keaveney. Councillor Body. Councillor Gregg. Councillor Milne.
Here.
Councillor Dobreen. Warden Matrosovs.
Here.
Councillor Bornigel.
Present.
Councillor Eccles, I believe, is joining us shortly, and Councillor Hutchinson.
Right.
Thank you. We have all members in attendance with the exception of Councillors Eccles and McQueen. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Let us begin by respectfully acknowledging that we are gathering on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabeg Nation, the people of the Three Fires, known as the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi Nations. And further, we give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, known collectively as Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, the traditional keepers of these lands and waters since time immemorial. In our south of our county lies the traditional territories of the Six Nations of the Grand River, Haudenosaunee. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and friendship with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. At this point in time, I'd like to put a call out if there are any declarations of interest for this council agenda. And I am seeing no hands up, so we'll proceed. Item 6 is the adoption of the minutes. It's recommended that the minutes of the County Council meeting and Committee of the Whole meeting dated July 10th, 2025, and the resolutions contained therein be adopted as presented. May I ask for a mover? Moved by the Deputy Warden and seconded by Councillor Hutchinson. Any discussion? All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Next, it's recommended that the closed session Committee of the Whole meeting minutes dated July 10th, 2025 be adopted as provided. May I ask for a mover? Moved by Councillor Nielsen, seconded by Councillor Keaveney. Any discussion? All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Item 6C, with regards to our long-term care committee, it's recommended that the long-term care committee of the Committee of Management meeting minutes dated July 3rd, 2025 be adopted as presented, and that the following resolutions contained therein be endorsed. Number 1, that report LTCRCM 1025 regarding a long-term care director update be received for information. Number 2, that report LTCRCM 1125 regarding a long-term care operational report dated April 15th to June 14th, 2025 be received for information, and that the report titled LTCRCM 1225 Long-Term Care Financial Update as of April 30th be received for information. May I ask for a mover and a seconder? It's moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Mackey. And with that, I'd like to invite Director Cornell to come to the lectern to speak to it.
Thank you, Warden Matrosovs, and through you, good morning, County Council. I'll just provide a summary of the meeting, and I'm just going to highlight items that we haven't discussed before. So we started the meeting in a really great way, and we had a tour of the new Rockwood redevelopment, and it was really exciting. The crew was actively craning structural pieces onto the building, and things are moving right along. So it's really exciting. In terms of an update from the meeting, some highlights of the director's update. There were some ministry updates, further information about items that we've already talked about in terms of legislation and it moving through the process. We held our quarterly family virtual call. So we host these quarterly, an opportunity to give an update to residents, families, caregivers, and there's an opportunity for a question and answer. So we hosted that. We had invited guests to that virtual meeting, Silver Fox Pharmacy, which is the new pharmacy. And there was some really good engagement with family members on the call with some questions about that change. I just want to highlight that we welcome back a number of students that provide support and work during the summer as team members. Many of them are actively in school taking their RN or RPN designations. We also partnered with Ontario Centres for Learning, Research and Innovation, so CLRI, and Grey County to renew the Personal Support Worker Education Fund that offered a series of 6 education sessions to PSWs across the Grey and Bruce regions. So we helped coordinate it, and it wasn't just limited to attendees from the Grey County or Bruce County homes, but it was to PSWs in all of the 17 long-term care homes in Grey Bruce. Also wanted to highlight that Karen Kraus is the current executive director at Rockwood Terrace, has accepted a new role as project lead for operational readiness for the Rockwood Terrace redevelopment, where she will help the county and residents in the transition to the new location. And operational readiness, it doesn't even sound easy when you say it fast. There's a lot of work to be done to be ready to move into a new long-term care home, to meet all of the standards, to pass ministry inspections, et cetera. And so she will be taking on the lead for that work. And the report says that we were actively recruiting to backfill her position, but we were able to announce yesterday that Terry Fisher, who is the current resident family services manager at Rockwood Terrace, will be stepping into the role of executive director in September, and she'll be working in partnership with Karen to get ready for the move, and then we'll be leading the home as the executive director going forward. So that was an exciting announcement to be able to share. From the operational report, a couple of highlights. We had some really good discussion. Dana Leach, our clinical specialist, talked about end-of-life and palliative care practices. This is important because it's important to people's lives, and it's important because there's a legislative encouragement and requirement to be implementing palliative care models within our long-term care homes. And so there was an update on the work happening in that area. Karen gave an update across the 3 homes regarding ministry inspections, and all 3 homes had visits from inspectors during the reporting period. And in addition to that, Rockwood Terrace had a proactive compliance inspection, and it used to be called an RQI, a required quality inspection, but the name has been updated to proactive compliance inspection, where 2 inspectors were on site for 12 days, just to give you a sense of how in-depth those inspections are. Shannon gave an update around 2 emergency situations that happened during the reporting period. So both Grey Gables and Rockwood Terrace experienced an emergency. Grey Gables had an electrical fire, which resulted in the use of a fire extinguisher. All residents and staff were removed safely. Everything was contained. And Rockwood Terrace had the smell of an electrical smell, but the incident did not trip the fire alarm, and staff followed the evacuation process, and everyone was safe, and everything was managed and taken care of. And I want to just highlight that the training and practicing that we do every month as required under a number of sets of legislation came in handy and proved to be really effective. And the teams at both homes responded quickly, appropriately, and did all the right things. So I just wanted to do a well done to the team under very stressful situation. And finally, Tolleen Parkin, the executive director at Lee Manor, shared a Color It story, which we always highlight in our meetings. And this story that she shared was the above and beyond efforts that team members made to support a resident who had moved in, where they had lost their English skills and were speaking in their native language. And team members stepped up. They used technology to learn words and phrases, and they even found a team member who was familiar with the language to be able to support that resident in a really difficult transition. Marcus Hawko, the long-term care financial manager, provided a financial update as of April 30th. It's important to note that April is still quite early to be able to give a really solid projection of where things are going. It's before the summer season, where people are on vacation, where we may have some staffing challenges, that kind of thing in terms of staffing. But just to highlight, at that time, Grey Gables was presenting to be over budget by 122,000. That's related to directly to snow removal. Last winter was quite a harsh winter. Lee Manor is currently under budget of 86,000, and Rockwood Terrace is under budget around 185,000. But again, it's a little early to make those projections, just enough to be able to say track it's looking good, and we're on top of it. We had closed meeting matters, and then the meeting was adjourned. So thank you, and if there's any questions, happy to take those.
Thank you very much. So with that, I'll put it out to council members if they have any questions. And a number of us were able to be on that tour, so thank you very much for that opportunity. It was wonderful to be able to actually see it coming to fruition after looking at it in many reports and many maps and diagrams. So with that, I don't see any further questions then, so thank you much, Director Cannell. I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you. We do have one more long-term care committee item. It is recommended that the closed session of the long-term care committee management meeting minutes dated July 3rd, 2025 be adopted as provided. May I ask for a mover? Moved by Councillor Mackey, seconded by Councillor Dobreen. Any discussion? All those in favor? And that motion is carried. We do not have any closed matters to attend to this morning, nor reports, so we'll move on to the bylaws. It's recommended that bylaw 524325 and 524425 and 524525 be introduced and be taken as read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the warden and the clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed to the bylaw book. Number 1, 524325, a bylaw to authorize the disposition of certain lands in the city of Owen Sound as described in Schedule A. Number 2, 524425, a bylaw to amend Schedules D, G, H, O, and U of bylaw 478813, being a bylaw to regulate traffic and parking on highways within Grey County, the Grey County road system. And number 3, 524525, a bylaw to confirm all the actions and proceedings of the council. May I ask for a mover? Moved by Councillor Dickert, seconded by Councillor Hutchinson. Any discussion? All those in favor? And that motion is carried. All right. Well, we've already heard some excellent news from Director Cornell, and we don't have any other special staff announcements this morning because I think we've had so many good news stories in the last few council meetings. We're going to take a pause and open it out to our council members to share news and celebrations from our municipalities. Who would like to go first? We'll start with Councillor Body.
How about this one? Run. Okay, I don't know what that other button is. Exciting to share some pretty good news. Owen Sound North Stars girls field lacrosse team under 15 U15 team won the gold medal in the B division of the provincial championship. And 100 years ago, I coached a bunch of kids, and we got to I think the top 4, and it's really difficult to win the provincial. So that's pretty impressive. Also, the U19 girls field lacrosse team won the bronze in the B division. So congratulations to both those teams. It's really impressive. Coming up is the Owen Sound Emancipation Picnic or Festival, 163rd year. So it's the longest and continuously running emancipation event in North America, and probably one of the longest running events. So that's Saturday of the long weekend. So it's going to be August 2nd at Harrison Park. It's a really neat event. It's great music, and all the families come back from all over, and it's pretty interesting to be there. Thanks.
Thank you. And we'll go to Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you, Warden Matrosovs, and good morning, everyone. Just want to share a couple of events that are happening in Meaford. This Saturday, the 26th, is the Pet Expo, and this is a huge pet-friendly event with over 100 vendors at our community center, and there will be lots of food and games and a full family event there. And the following weekend, from August the 1st to the 3rd, is our 4th annual Summerfest. And that is the Poutine Fest, where a number of our restaurants are participating. Everybody makes a different type of poutine, so you'll want to try those out. Friday is Movie Under the Stars. It's going to be the Goonies, so family friendly and lots of fun. And there will be vendors in the market square. Over 70 vendors will be in the market square with live music all day, Saturday and Sunday. So as I always say, Meaford is the place to be. Thank you.
Thank you. And around the council table, looking for any others? Okay, not seeing any further hands up. So we'll move on to adjournment and Madam Clerk. Okay, so with that, then we'll just do a motion to adjourn. May I ask for a mover? Moved by Councillor McQueen, seconded by Councillor McKay. Any discussion? All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Okay, we'll just give a few moments to switch over to the Committee of the Whole. Thank you. So we'll now proceed with the Committee of the Whole of July 24th, 2025. I'll call to order this business and ask if there are any declarations of interest. Seeing no hands go up, we can proceed. We do not have any business arising for minutes. And with that, we have one delegation. So this morning, I'm going to first invite Ms. Buckton as our Senior Policy Planner to come up and make introductions before we get into the Archaeological Management Plan deputation.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Really excited to be here today and to have some staff from TMHC Consulting joining us for a presentation. So I'll just do a very brief introduction before we turn that over. This morning, we will have our 2 representatives from TMHC Inc. joining us to present regarding the archaeological potential model that they've prepared for us in relation to the Archaeological Management Plan. Joining us today is Dr. Holly Martel. Holly's a principal at TMHC, a skilled archaeologist, project manager, and relationship builder. And we've been so very fortunate to have her as project lead for the model preparation component of the AMP project. Holly's joined today by Dr. John Moody, TMHC's digital applications manager and the GIS lead for the project. John has over 15 years of experience working on various facets of archaeology projects, and is an innovator in his field relating to data collection, management, and presentation through technology. And certainly we benefited from John's expertise as well in preparation of the GIS-based model as they'll present to you today. So I think the intention is this one being related to the project will be a little bit longer than our usual delegation. So they've got lots of information to share with us today. We'll have an opportunity for some questions, and then we'll also be presenting the staff report just a little bit later. So there'll be some further discussion opportunity then. But I won't take up any more time. We'll just pass that along to TMHC. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So welcome, Ms. Martell and Mr. Moody for your presentation this morning, and council will listen and then we'll ask questions of clarification to you while you're here. And then, of course, we'll have a further discussion when the actual report comes forward later in the agenda. So with that, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Warden and Council and Liz, for inviting us to come and present to you today on the progress and findings of the preparation of the archaeological management plan for Grey County. Just to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to talk about today, we wanted to give sort of a high-level summary of archaeology in Grey County, talk a little bit about the goals of the archaeological management plan, discuss how we've developed the archaeological potential model, or that planning layer that's used in a planning context, what the methodology was for data collection, how we've compiled that layer, how it will be used in the planning context going forward, and current status of the project, and discuss some next steps. Archaeology in Grey County is something that is a lot of community members are very passionate about. There is a high level of archaeological significance throughout various areas in Grey County. The county actually contains some of the oldest and most significant known archaeological sites in Ontario, dating back over 10,000 years old. To date, 199 registered archaeological sites exist in the county, and those include both Indigenous and historic settler sites. 91 of those are Indigenous villages, camps, and burial sites, which all together offer evidence of continuous Indigenous presence in the county from at least the end of the last ice age to the present day. Early efforts at archaeological conservation in Grey County really came at the hands of really passionate individuals, researchers like Peter Stork, for example, and Dr. William Fitzgerald, who are very interested in understanding past Indigenous life in the county, and we're undertaking research alongside avocationals and concerned citizens who were watching out for very precious archaeological resources and trying to take efforts to make sure they were documented and protected in threat of ensuing development. A lot of early efforts were concentrated in the 1980s under the umbrella of a provincial ministry responsible for archaeology. There was an archaeological conservation program, and folks like Charlie and Ella Garrett, you might be familiar with their names, and Mike and Christine Kirby worked tirelessly on weekends and evenings to go out and document sites and make sure they were identified and protected. And at that time, there was no municipal or planning framework to really address the conservation of archaeological resources, and no legislation to support that, or a requirement for archaeological assessments to be undertaken at that time. So their efforts were really important. Today, what we know about archaeology in Grey County really stems back to their work. A lot of those registered sites we know about are comprise the bulk of registered sites still known about in Grey County. But when we look at the number of sites in the county in relation to the landmass, Grey County's got this landmass of 4,500 square kilometers. The 199 sites is really, really a very small number and is not representative in any way of the number of sites that are actually out there. When we look in comparison to, say, a smaller municipality like the City of London, for example, which is a tenth of the size of Grey County, there are over 500 registered sites known there now. And a lot of that dates back to the early development of an archaeological management plan in the mid-90s and sort of rigorous implementation of archaeological conservation within the planning context. When we look also at the registered sites, here's a map on the right that shows where they're distributed across the county. You can see that there's quite a bit of difference. Many of the sites we know about are concentrated in the areas where those researchers have looked in the historic territories of the Peytoon, for example, in the Beaver Valley, or they're concentrated in municipalities in those areas that have witnessed a lot of land development, for example, along Highway 26 and those lakeside areas where the county has witnessed a lot of residential and commercial development, a lot of road works to improve transportation and infrastructure networks. We also have sites documented in areas that have been subject to survey for some of those aggregate pits that, delving into the rich aggregate resources in the county. But for the most part, the sites are being found where we've been looking, but we're not necessarily identifying potential in all areas of the county. If you can see on the map too, that many of the lower tier municipalities, some of the historic township have no or very few archaeological sites recorded so far. And that is often a reflection of a lack of survey and assessment that's been done. Some related to the fact that those areas just don't see much in the way of land development, but in other cases, it's a product of the planning context and some uncertainty around how and when an archaeological assessment should be undertaken. Today, there is legislation, and since the 1990s, there is a legislation and policy and regulatory framework that makes municipalities in Ontario responsible for archaeological conservation. The provincial planning statement in particular requires that planning authorities shall not permit development and site alteration on lands containing archaeological resources or areas of archaeological potential unless the significant archaeological resources have been conserved. The Planning Act calls for a recognition of archaeological resources, and the Ontario Heritage Act offers protection for registered archaeological sites in the province. Municipalities across Ontario, Grey County being one of them, have often been challenged to manage archaeology and these archaeological interests and meet those provincial requirements. And there's a number of reasons for that. Identifying those areas of concern or interest where archaeological sites might be, where there is archaeological potential, is not an easy thing to do. The information to make those evaluations is very hard to access. It's not consistently updated or not consolidated in one place. There's often uncertainty about when and where to require archaeological assessment, and it can be approached differently by different planners at various tiers, lower and upper, and it can vary based on the type of application being put forth in a planning context or the legislative requirements. But noting that the consequences for not identifying archaeological interests, as we all know, with recent press findings across Ontario, can be very difficult to navigate, particularly as Indigenous communities are expecting more and asserting their treaty and territorial rights and interests with respect to their archaeological heritage. So the goals of the Archaeological Management Plan, or AMP for short, is to help a municipality, or in this case, help Grey County, meet their responsibilities under the Planning Act and provincial policy statement. And an AMP can help develop a good understanding of where archaeological resources are or are currently known within the county or might be located, can create a clear process for addressing archaeological interests in the planning context, can help establish a consistent and transparent process for requiring archaeological assessments as part of the Planning Act and other municipal projects and approvals, and define a better process for engaging Indigenous communities when and where their heritage is affected by land use changes approved by the county. It's also acknowledged that an AMP can help address Indigenous interests in archaeology. And then again, going back to the provincial planning statement, it suggests or requires planning authorities shall engage early with Indigenous communities and ensure their interests are considered when identifying, protecting, and managing archaeological resources, built heritage resources, and cultural heritage landscapes. So what is an archaeological management plan? It's essentially a planning tool for municipalities to use to manage, in other words, to identify, to conserve, and protect archaeological resources within their jurisdiction. It really helps establish a clear planning framework to plan for the better conservation of archaeological resources. An AMP is essentially a very collaborative process. We don't do this on our own. We take into account the information, the expertise, the experience that a variety of planners, both at the county level and private planners, developers, individuals who interact with archaeology and archaeological assessment requirements on a daily basis. The county has developed a technical advisory committee, which has helped us along the way within this process. We've engaged with Indigenous and descendant communities, including Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, who's had a leading role, historic Saugeen Métis, Six Nations, many of those communities that were identified in your land acknowledgement today. We've been working with the local Black heritage communities as well, stakeholders, museums throughout the county or beyond the county that may have information about archaeological resources and collections from Grey County, local historical and archaeological organizations, community groups, and of course, local archaeologists with expertise in this area. There are two components essentially of the archaeological management plan. One is the archaeological potential model, which is essentially a GIS-based map or planning layer or planning layers and data that informs those layers. And the compilation of that has been the responsibility of TMHC, and that's what we're going to talk most about today. Alongside that, the Grey County Planning Department is preparing policy planning and implementation framework, which will develop the procedures and approach for utilizing that GIS map or planning layer, that archaeological potential model, addressing how that will be used within making planning decisions. So today, as I said, we're going to speak to the archaeological potential model and our methodology for establishing that model and planning tool. Building the model, we have used a series of steps. They're kind of a logical set of steps that we've taken to create a number of layers that we can then compile into an overall planning tool or a composite layer to be used by planning staff. The first step is to map the archaeological sites in the county. So we wanted to gather all that data on the registered archaeological sites that are known within the county. Registered sites are kept in an inventory that is maintained by the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism within a provincial registry or database. So we've collected that information, but we also wanted to supplement that, knowing that there has been sort of relatively little archaeological assessment done, particularly in certain parts of Grey County. So we wanted to supplement those registered sites information with information that suggests that archaeological sites have been found, but potentially not registered, or may exist in other areas, but have not been confirmed by an archaeologist. So the map of archaeological sites, then our whole data set of known archaeological findings comes from sites that have been confirmed and identified by archaeologists, but others that have just been reported with in historical documents, whether those be maps, newspapers, accounts, some oral histories, or other information, museum collections that suggest that sites could be present on lands within the county. To give you a summary, the map on the right shows the locations of the archaeological sites that we've included in our model that we are aware of. As I said, 199 of those are registered. We've got sites that came directly from the database and the ministry source directly. We've done through further investigation, found an additional 40 registered sites there, bringing the total to 199. As I said earlier, about almost half of those have an Indigenous component to them, and the other half relating to sort of historic settler sites. The sites that we've supplemented, those sites that are unregistered in the provincial database, and those may be find spots of single artifacts that archaeologists have found over the years, but might have not have met the threshold for provincial registration. Find spots, including historical references or site leads, areas where sites may be known to have existed but have not yet been confirmed by an archaeologist. We also, as part of this compilation of this map, verified the site locations through comparison with reports and made sure that the data was highly accurate. The second step of building the archaeological model was then to map areas of archaeological potential. So where are those areas where sites that maybe have not yet been found, but there is potential for sites to exist? That process is very much guided by standards and guidelines that are established by the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism, who provide some baseline criteria for predicting where archaeological sites might exist and evaluating or identifying archaeological potential. Some of the example criteria that are used to signal archaeological potential include the presence of watercourses, wetlands, glacial shorelines, historic settlement features like churches or mapped buildings, transportation routes like early roadways or trails, portages, and resource areas. And we know that Greg County has one of the most primary sources for Indigenous toolstone in all of the province, used throughout the Great Lakes. And it's a very important part of that Indigenous history in Greg County. So to prepare a map of archaeological potential, basically, we and John has spent a lot of time doing this, identifying the various physical features, historic features from historic maps and so on, put those into a GIS map in a database. And from those features, we establish a distance buffer around those features and create an area of archaeological potential. Within the model, we've created two key layers of archaeological potential. One of those is an Indigenous archaeological potential layer. The other is a historic or a municipal settlement period or settlement area map of potential. We map these separately because they are very much tied to traditional land uses, different systems of land management, resource utilization, where Indigenous archaeological potential is very much tied to traditional knowledge and land use, oriented around seasonal cycles, hunting, fishing, the gathering of traditional resources like medicines and edible plants, very much heavily centered on water. Water is life, of course, to Indigenous communities. The historic or municipal settlement era potential is really much geared to or based on a colonial land-based management system. So we look at settlement lots and early buildings and industries. It's heavily centered on transportation routes because those are what encouraged settlement to occur in the first place. And of course, we look at the registered sites relating to both Indigenous and historic settlement when we develop those mapping layers. The third step of building the archaeological potential map is to also map all of those areas that's been previously studied. What are the challenges to know where and when an archaeological assessment has taken place in the past, and also what its status is. So archaeological assessments are done in various stages, and sometimes there's only a background study that's done. Sometimes there's an intensive survey. Sometimes lands are cleared of archaeological concern, and sometimes there's still some lingering interest. Maybe some sites have been registered and not yet fully mitigated. So for a planner to evaluate and know the status of archaeological interest on a particular property is critical, and that information is hard to collect in the current system without sort of comprehensive mapping of these areas of previous assessment and backup data that indicates what the particular status of archaeological interests on a specific land parcel are. So in terms of that, we've created a map of all the archaeological assessments and studies that we were able to identify. We did identify 567 in Grey County. We were able to obtain 551 of those reports. We could not obtain 16. Most of those are very old and nobody seems to be able to find them anymore. The reports, many of them are stored in a provincial database managed by that ministry again, but they can often get lost. Some of the old records are particularly hard to find. Tracking the status can also be challenging with changes in the ministry administration as well. We note that close to half of those reports were completed prior to the contemporary standards and guidelines for consultant archaeologists, which were passed in 2011. And those are both the best practice and regulatory standards that are required to be met for archaeological interests to be considered in the province. So we have tagged all of those reports, noting that some of those older reports done prior to the contemporary standards may need a second look, may need some engagement with Indigenous communities, may need some further clarification before it can be determined that lands are clear of archaeological concern. Finally, the last step kind of in our building the archaeological map is to map and remove areas where there is no further archaeological interest, either because they've been cleared by previous studies or where there's deep land impacts that have removed the possibility of archaeological resources to be present. And the map on the right, again, shows areas that we have mapped that no longer have integrity or no longer have archaeological interest because they have been fulsomely studied. So when we developed this layer, again, we looked at those all of those previous assessments, and we've been able to tag where archaeological concerns have been fully addressed. That would mean that those areas could then be removed from the archaeological potential layer and that planning tool to not require an archaeological assessment again. We've also done an evaluation, a high-level evaluation of integrity that's been focused on some key areas in the county to evaluate or identify areas where there is no longer potential for finding archaeological resources intact. So those areas that have been very deeply and very extensively disturbed. Providing a bit of an example here and more discussion about how we've evaluated integrity. It's not an easy process to do based on a desktop review only without going out to a site and spending a lot of time researching the prior land use on a property. But we were still able to do, I think, a good high-level evaluation in various areas through careful analysis of aerial imagery. We look at contemporary conditions. We look at historical aerial imagery that demonstrates and can demonstrate the degree of prior extensive disturbance. We targeted in this case some obvious areas where, for example, aggregate extraction has happened, some major subdivision developments that have involved, extensive land clearing and disturbance. We've looked at a lot of the urban lands outside of the historic settlement areas where there might be some interest in historic archaeological resources. So we were able to remove a significant number of land parcels from the archaeological potential model in that way. The map on the left there is just an example of areas that have been removed of archaeological potential. Those areas in orange there have been removed because they were previously assessed and all the archaeological concerns have been addressed in those parcels. The area that's in the green has been removed because we were able to determine through the aerial imagery that those areas have been very extensively disturbed and there's no further archaeological concern there. So with all those steps taken and those mapping layers developed, we are then able to kind of compile them together to create that composite archaeological potential model or map that can be used in a planning context. So this slide is just giving a general summary of what those layers are and how we've combined them. So we created a map of Indigenous archaeological potential, as I said, combine that with a layer denoting the historic archaeological potential. Both of those layers add potential to the mapping layer. And then we remove from those the integrity, the places where there's no longer integrity, where archaeological assessments have been undertaken and removed archaeological concern. And then we've also then removed areas that are outside of the county jurisdiction. So that would be all of those federal lands and provincial lands for which the county does not make any planning decisions for. The final outcome would be that composite archaeological potential layer, and that's the layer that would be used by planning staff when determining whether or not an archaeological assessment will be required as part of the approval of a planning application or during municipal infrastructure and development projects. So I want to talk a little bit more too about that planning tool, give you an idea of what it looks like a little bit more close up and kind of give some kind of analysis and explanation about its effectiveness and what we've arrived at. So the composite map, as you see here in high level, indicates where archaeological assessment should happen to fulfill those provincial requirements to manage, identify, conserve archaeological resources. We have tested the effectiveness of that model, and we've done that by comparing the areas of archaeological potential mapped in this model to the registered and known archaeological sites, that sample we talked about earlier in the presentation. When we do that, this particular model that we've developed, it captures 92 of the 96 Indigenous archaeological sites and find spots that we've identified. So it captures 96% of those. That's an excellent capture for this type of modeling. For the historic era sites, it captures 90% of those sites, which again is a very high capture. And when combined, the model captures 93% of the total archaeological sites in our sample that is available to us. In total, the composite archaeological map captures 72% of the county landmass, which again, in comparison to other AMPs, is a pretty reasonable target. Wanting to also qualify, I mean, it can often seem like this is a very dense map and there's a high percentage of area of archaeological potential in the county, but wanted to speak to how it actually kind of gets triggered and used in a planning context. So a large percentage of lands with archaeological potential, as shown on this map, will likely never see development. That is, they are rural farmlands and natural or conservation lands that are well away from settlement areas. You know, there's very limited likelihood that they would ever be developed in a way that would require the county to trigger an archaeological assessment, or that a planning application would be submitted. The map is really specifically applicable to those circumstances and applications where, within a planning context, archaeological assessments are triggered. So to give some example on that, it would never, these areas of archaeological potential would never, for example, be zoned onto private lands or be applicable to, say, a farmer who wants to do some landscaping. It would never apply there. If that farmer wanted to build a barn and a building permit was required, for example, unless the Grey County planning context requires archaeological assessments for building permits, it would not trigger an archaeological assessment. But on that same land parcel, if a farmer wanted to sever multiple lots, build houses, or redevelop their property entirely as a residential subdivision, then an archaeological assessment would be triggered through the use of this planning tool. Some more detail just about what the planning tool might look like. And it's hard to show kind of the different representations of information here, but this is kind of a two-dimensional representation of what the planning layer would look like. Noting that behind this for any planner would be more details about what the features of archaeological potential are. If there's, say, a registered site, what that site is. There's a lot of information that would be in the data layer that would allow a planner to have much more information than just see this map. So the model itself is not just a map, it is also the data that goes with it that informs it. So the planning tool itself is both the map and data layers that are consulted when a planning application is received or municipal project is planned. If the proposal includes an area of archaeological potential, an archaeological assessment should be planned or triggered. The underlying data also alerts planners to the presence of archaeological sites immediately to pass along to the proponent or to whoever is coordinating a project to assist in planning. So it really allows very early planning in terms of what is going to happen on a property, and gives a little bit additional planning guidance even at a pre-consultation stage to a proponent or planning for a municipal project, for example. So the layer, as you can see in the image on the right, shows some features of archaeological potential there. There's some historic buildings and roadways, water courses, a registered archaeological site. All of that green is buffering around those features of archaeological potential. Any project that would, or planning application that would occur within or just clip any portion of archaeological potential would require an archaeological assessment. As also informed by the planning and implementation process. And any area that fell outside of that green space would not require an archaeological assessment. So in terms of our next steps from the potential model, so where we are at, we have developed this, we are pretty close to finalizing it. The model and its data layers are currently being reviewed by Indigenous communities and stakeholders, and we are just kind of wrapping up receiving feedback on that, and we'll be kind of completing that phase of the project very shortly. We will also, TMHC will be making recommendations for a process and a time period for updating the data that's within the model and for keeping the information current. And it's really important that the model and the mapping layer is considered to be a dynamic tool. There are archaeological sites registered every day. There are archaeological assessments and new planning applications coming in constantly. And the data is the really critical piece here in managing the county's risk. So it's really important that we kind of position the model and the AMP in that very dynamic way. Aligned with the completion of the archaeological potential layer, that planning layer, the potential model, is the development of the policy planning and implementation framework that is currently under the county scope. That framework will establish a process for how that map is going to be used within the planning context, what types of projects and planning application it is used for example, just for plans of subdivision, rezoning, severances, other applications, when Indigenous and descendant community engagement is required, what and how requirements for archaeological assessment are communicated back to proponents. It will also set out a plan for training staff on the use of the model and understanding the data layers and what's behind that. It will also help establish a process for addressing inadvertent discoveries. We hear about these in the news all the time, and helping the county manage those and helping proponents manage those as well. We'll also establish a process for maintaining the database of sites and reports, as I mentioned, for incorporating new finds and new information. Some of the benefits to having an AMP really is to increase the efficiency, consistency, and predictability of the archaeological process or identifying archaeological concerns within the planning process. The current process right now can be very subjective. It's very ad hoc. There's a lot of uncertainty in the process about decision making, when, why, and how. Who should we contact? The process will be established to keep information current and accurate, which I said is very important. Ultimately, though, the biggest benefit is that it will help reduce risk to the county. It will ensure the requirements and responsibilities are met, as they may not have been met in the most fulsome way in the past. It's important to acknowledge that these requirements for addressing archaeological interests and conserving archaeological resources exist whether or not an AMP is in place. The AMP can certainly help reduce delays and uncertainty on behalf of the proponents, but also for municipal projects. If the expectations are set out and they're very clear from the beginning, I think it will help all parties move forward in a good way. An AMP can also reduce the number and likelihood of unanticipated fines and work stoppages where archaeological assessment or Indigenous engagement was not done in advance. And there are several examples within Grey County where we're witnessing, both on the archaeological side and county side, where there have been situations where not everyone was on the same page, and it's resulted in significant sites being found and a lot of additional costs and delay in that respect. So that's the end of kind of our formal presentation today, and we would gladly take questions with respect to our piece of the archaeological management plan. And I know Liz is also present there, can address anything directed to the county side as well.
Okay, thank you very much for those details. So with that, then we'll put it out to council members, committee, the whole members, if they have questions. We'll begin with Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you very much, Warden. Just a quick question regarding, you've mentioned that the mapping itself is dynamic, and as information is gathered, the map is going to be updated, and you'd be clearing more lands, I guess would be the best way to put it. When it comes to the archaeological studies that need to be done, the scope of those, is it on like very minute and specific to the works that's being done within the land, or is it more broad to the size of the project, of the lot itself? So I'm just wondering, in terms of when archaeological studies are done, how much potential, I'll use the word clearing, of the composite archaeological potential mapping gets done. Just wondering, like, the size, the scope of each study.
Sure. It's dependent on the particular application. So if a planning application comes in and it's for a 20-acre residential development, it would typically cover, and that all of that land is going to be impacted by the development. then the standard is usually that that entire parcel is subject to archaeological excavation or investigation. Now, I would qualify that in saying you have other types of projects, like say municipal parks projects where you might just be doing a trail. And in that case, the archaeological assessment is often scoped or focused specifically on the impacts from that project, as opposed to the complete legal land parcel. And I would also note that there are instances where the county can make those decisions to scope down assessments. So there are a lot of examples of, say, cottage developments where you might have, you know, a small impact from a footprint of a new cottage and the driveway and any infrastructure going there, but you might have another, you know, 20 acres of woodlot or natural areas in behind that are not being touched, but the planning, you know, application permits certain land uses to take place. So there's ways that that can be scoped down by the municipality, but just ensuring that there's other kinds of covenants or language and review of any additional land impacts on those areas that are not examined archaeologically. So there's a lot of power within the county to establish those rules and scope of those assessments for sure.
Okay, thank you. I'll look around the room and we'll go to Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Mr. Ward, or Madam Warden, and to the presenter. I'm not sure where this is going to end up because I look at the one map that's a lot of blue in Grey County. I know with other layers that we have seen in the past, a lot of times we have checklists that sometimes identify if an area needs further scope or not. Concerns me if every zoning or every severance or every building a permit or every barn built has to have an archaeological study. I think we're going to hear from that as a county councillor as well. Certainly the potential, I can see the mapping, and if there's areas that show a potential, you know, my father, when he was a kid, found an arrowhead. You could have arrowheads anywhere across this county. I couldn't find one, so I had to buy one. They're there. There's lots of them around. So my point is to what scope are we going to zero this down to, in the sense of, and I think on the more on the proactive side is, if people find stuff, then, you know, they may not identify it because they're worried about the overlaying, what that could do to their property as well. So I think there has to be some kind of a balanced approach to where you move forward on, you know, I know, for an example, Scenic Caves in Blue Mountains is a very historical site of knowledge, knowing that was a village, certainly those areas, but it does concern me that, you know, to what level, to how far down you're going to drive this. I understand aggregate operators or full development subdivisions, but if Mr. Smith is going to build a barn, you know, I think that has a different potential on where this ends up going. And then I always look at a checklist as something that, you know, could be scoped, could it be, you know, it doesn't meet that requirement, or if it's in an area where it has been highly identified. I just think there has to be a balance as well.
Understood. And I
Okay.
think
Sorry, I'm just gonna just ask if you just want to respond to anything that you can offer as the consultants. However, the discussion for this item will come when the report comes forward. So just if there's anything that you'd like to respond to that will assist in the information that Councillor McQueen was asking.
sure, I can just say that those questions are going to be addressed within the county's planning and implementation framework about which of those applications actually require an archaeological assessment and which do not. And those are important decisions because, again, yes, we do not want to impinge on, you know, private landowners, you know, use of their land. And so, yeah, we do identify that. There are lots of opportunities to work with identifying, you know, where there are also very high areas of archaeological sensitivity, where there might be an opportunity to, you know, look more closely at some of those areas for some of those smaller applications, but not then require that to be the case throughout the entire county. So there's lots of opportunities within that planning context. I would also note that there is an existing checklist that is developed by the ministry that many county staff have been using already, which is problematic for a number of reasons. It requires, in order to complete that checklist, it require evaluation of disturbance. The Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism is very clear that only someone with an archaeological license can make that evaluation of disturbance. So that's often a place where a planner can make that decision, and then you find something in the field and then it causes a work stoppage, and it has created a situation in the past. That checklist also requires engagement with an Aboriginal, the language in the checklist is Aboriginal or Indigenous peoples, and to verify that and speak to their traditional land use as well. So how does a planner use that or make that determination can be very challenging from the county perspective. So the AMP is a way to help have those conversations and make that determination together.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'll look around the room and we'll go to Councillor Greg.
Thank you, Warden. And through you, a question, your second last slide, Holly, and thanks for the presentation today, states reduce risk to the county. It's very easy just to always insert risk into the document. Can you please expand and define exactly what you are referring to in using the word risk?
Sure. There's a number of case studies where, you know, planners, for example, in other municipalities have made determinations based on that checklist we talked about and made those decisions. And then archaeological resources or burial sites in particular have been identified. A proponent is then saying, well, why? And they've been identified in areas that have been deemed of no archaeological interest, and archaeological assessment has not been required within that municipal planning context. And then the proponent is left with, you know, work stoppage and millions of dollars of costs in reparation work, in not able to necessarily proceed with their development. Their schedule is off and they're looking back to the county for why didn't you trigger an archaeological assessment when it very clearly needed one. So the decision making is not easy from a planning context. Archaeological interests are very hard to identify within a planning context, especially with new planners who are unfamiliar with the process. We've seen cases where municipalities have been required to pay the costs of reparation work and archaeological assessment midway through construction projects. It causes a lot of shutdowns and expense and hardship and damages relationships with Indigenous communities and with proponents as well. So that's happening and has happened throughout a lot of municipalities. So AMPs can help define that process more clearly, make sure that archaeological concerns are addressed early on. People aren't finding out about these partway through developments. There's not work stoppages, and making these things move forward in a very transparent way.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go to Councillor Dobreen.
Thank you. And through you, Warden, good morning, everyone. And thank you for your presentation. From a planning perspective, we already circulate to Indigenous agencies with regard to their interest. Recently, we have experienced a requirement for phase 1 archaeological studies when an existing development and an existing farm is looking to sever or surplus farm severance, where development and farming has occurred for decades, years, for however long. That phase 1 study will produce a certain level, either decide whether or not it has to go to a phase 2 or phase 3, or it can stop right there. At what point will our local planners then receive those phase 1 studies? Should they be forwarding them to be incorporated into this plan? And maybe it's a question for when we get to the staff report. I see a nod over there. So I wasn't sure the involvement and at what level. So thank you.
Okay, so Ms. Martell, if there's anything that you'd like to add, just because you won't be part of that discussion when we get to the county report, but the staff will hold on to that discussion when we get to the report. Is there anything that you wanted to add to that? Okay. All right. Thank you. So Councillor Dobreen, hold that thought and we'll bring up county staff later. Okay, and looking around the room for any other hands. Okay, all right. Seeing no further hands, thank you very much, Ms. Martell and Mr. Moody, for attending today, and thank you for the details that you provided and presented to us. And we will go into a fulsome discussion when we come to the staff report that comes later in the agenda. Thank you. Okay. So with that then, what I'd like to do at this point in time, looking at the time, is I'd like to call out for determination of any items requiring separate discussion from the consent agenda. And then when we get to that point, we'll do a break before we go into the items that are for discussion. So with that, I'll put out a call for anything that's listed in 6. We have 7 different items that a committee of the whole member would like to have a separate discussion on. Anything there? Not seeing hands to my left or my right or on the screen. So with that, then I'll just ask that it's recommended that the following consent agenda items be received and that staff be authorized to take actions necessary to give effect to the recommendations in the staff reports and that the correspondence be supported or received for information as recommended in the consent agenda. May I ask for a mover? Moved by Councillor Dobreen, seconded by Councillor Nielsen. Any discussion? All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you. So at this point in time, we'll call a break. If we can come back by 11:20, we will continue with the items on the agenda. Thank you. Okay, if I could please invite all of our committee, the whole members back to the table. Okay, so we are going to move on with section 7 of our, let's see, yep, section 7 of our agenda. These are the items that we have flagged for discussion. The first one is item 7A. It's recommended that report PDR CW 4825 regarding the archaeological management plan status update be received for information. May I ask for a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Kentner and seconded by Councillor Carleton. So it's now on the floor for discussion. So I will invite Ms. Buckton to come up and begin the conversation regarding the report. Thank you.
We just got a very brief slide deck. We're just getting that loaded up. Thank you very much. Okay, so I thank you very much. I'm really excited to talk to County Council today about this project. It has been what I've been living and breathing for the last year, climbing an incredibly steep learning curve, and I feel so much richer for having done so. Hoping to share some of that today. We've certainly had an informative presentation by TMHC staff. I think they're going to be hanging around on the line in case we do run into some questions at this phase as well, that they might be better suited to answer. But I think we'll try to kind of parlay from the model into where we're headed with this project. So in the report that's been provided for you, we've broken down or articulated this project as being comprised of 3 phases. So the first is the preparation of the archaeological potential model, as TMHC has presented on today. The next component of that is the archaeological management plan. And so that's a report format document that will outline the processes and procedures. And Holly did speak to this a little bit in her presentation as well, just outlining the types of, triggers that would be articulated through the planning process, right? So knowing that we have that model, we're identifying those areas of potential. What do we want to do with that information? So obviously there's some assessment requirements, but on what type of applications, to what scope, to what scale, and what other tools do we want to establish to kind of support that framework and the way that we deal with that framework in our process. So all of that detail will be established in that plan. And then we'll move into project implementation. And so through the implementation phase, that's where we would envision that we would be actively using the potential model. We would have our processes established together with the lower tiers and would be, really implementing that work into our processes. And that will come with training as well. So I think I really just wanted to focus in and highlight on this next step that we're moving into. So this has already started to some degree. I have worked with TMHC to identify a bit of a table of contents or an inclusions list for that AMP document. And so that inclusions list covers off the processes and procedures. It also will address some of the policy, which would be embedded into our official plan, as well as some of those unanticipated fines, procedures, and protocols. So it says AMO, that's actually meant to be AMP. So the AMP is to be drafted in-house by county staff. And so that's summer and fall of 2025. Like I say, that work is underway. That will be informed by our better practices in archaeology, land use planning, and as well the local consultation and engagement efforts. We just had a kickoff meeting yesterday with Saugeen Ojibwe Nation to start to talk about that, and we'll be establishing a standing meeting with them so that we have an ongoing touch point in relation to getting the procedures into place, but then also for the future implementation processes. That inclusions list is prepared, and I have been working to populate procedural elements of the plan. TMHC provided us with a copy of many, many AMPs from across the province. So we've got some good examples that we can pull from and look at the different ways that different places have addressed some of these procedures and policies in their plans. So we'll pull from that to some degree. That policy writing will follow after we've got the procedures sorted out. That would come forward and eventually look to be embedded in our official plan. So that would really describe those processes and how that applies in the planning context. And then we anticipate that as we get that draft completed, there would be a phase of consultation with respect to those policies and procedures. They will be developed collaboratively, so we will be back and forth with the other parties that will be using those policies as we develop them. But we will have a formal consultation. Not all of the First Nations that we've reached out to have taken an incredibly active role in the process thus far. So I think there are a number of communities that would just like to have a chance to see those policies before we complete. That will also include that correspondence with the member municipalities and as well some of the other agencies. So the Niagara Escarpment Commission, for example, this will be a resource that would intersect with the planning, the framework that they administer as well. And then ongoing consideration as we are drafting this will be made to those implementation needs. So I'd love to be able to stand up here and say by X date, we'll have that plan in front of you and it'll be completely vetted and ready to go. And we'll get that policy adoption advanced. But realistically, it's a lot of moving parts. And so we're just going to have to work through as we go. And I think our intention is to bring that policy back for adoption only once we've got that implementation framework sufficiently advanced so that we can hit the ground running once that's in place. So I think that's what I've prepared in terms of the slides for today. I did want to open it up for any conversation or questions around kind of that next step. Our intention is to be communicating with you and through the committee structures as well as we're working through that. But happy to do my best to answer any questions that may arise today. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So it's good to know that you're there as well as the consultants are there, still available online in case there are any specific questions that they might be able to help in answering. And it has been moved and seconded to receive for information. And one of the key aspects I'm hearing from you is seeking just input for the next steps. That this is, we're not locking this in today. This is how are we feeling about this? What questions do we have? And what kind of input would we like to be considered along the way as you provide us with that step-by-step process? Okay. All right. So with that, then we'll begin the committee of the whole questions. We'll begin with the Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Madam Warden. And through you, Liz, thank you very much. Just wondering, is there a role here for the provincial and federal ministries, however they describe themselves nowadays? I can't remember the titles, but is there a role for them to be involved in? Do they necessarily need to approve our policy or not approve, so to speak? Could you maybe speak on that a little bit, please? Thank you.
Wonderful, and through you, Warden, happy to speak to that. So the EMP itself, there isn't an approval process for it. It is a management plan for resources in our geography. That said, there is quite a large legislative framework that goes around how that work happens. And so certainly the principles of those standards and guidelines have been regarded, I guess, in preparation of the model and the way that we've treated that data. And so we are, I guess, obligated to continue to maintain those standards and guidelines through the work that we're doing. But there is not an approval authority role for the province in that. That said, I do think we will have some conversation with the ministry around data sharing. Right now, we've got everybody in on just a temporary review basis to look at the model and to help us truth some of the site data. But I think the First Nations have expressed interest in ongoing access to some of that site data as we've compiled, because it's not available in other ways. And so we'd like to try and facilitate that. I think that will smooth the process if we're both looking at similar information. But we'll just need to work through logistics with the province of what agreements and that type of thing that we need to put in place. So from that perspective, I think there'll be some intersection. I guess I would just additionally say that so TMHC prepared the potential model also for Bruce County. And so I think there there are some ongoing discussions that Bruce is having regarding those data access pieces as well. So as much as possible, we will be cross-pollinating to try and make sure that we've got a consistent approach right across the region, given that our models build from the same methodology as well. We're on the way to that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Looking around the room, we'll go to Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Madam Warden, but were you going to address Councillor DeBreen's question at this point? 'Cause I'm really curious about that question on surplus farm buildings, but I do have a comment and question to make.
Okay, so I'm waiting for hands to be raised, but Councillor DeBreen, would you like to reintroduce your question?
Thank you. Certainly. Thank you for the reminder. The question that I posed, Liz, and thank you very much for the conversation at break, was in the process of being required through our, let me start again, through our Indigenous circulation, when a archaeological study of any degree is requested, and that is at the proponent's expense, would it be a requirement for that study to be shared with the county to be uploaded into this database? Okay, and did you want it back? So I'm so sorry. And to that point, recently we've had where a community school is being proposed to be severed from a farm parcel, or in any case, a surplus farm severance, where it might trigger a phase 1 or more archaeological study.
Great, thanks so much for that. And through you, Madam Warden. So I think something just jumped out at me in the way that you'd phrased that. So you said, as we circulate the applications to the Indigenous communities. So I'll just start there. So I think one of the opportunities that the AMP process presents us with is how do we actually do that engagement and identify those requirements earlier in the process. So not at the point that we're sending out that notice of the application that it's been received, that we're moving to a public meeting, but prior to, so at a pre-consultation stage. So that will be one of the elements there is we'll be able to flag those sooner for proponents. But I think in terms of those requirements to share back with us, it's a great suggestion. And I do think that through the drafting of the AMP, we will include some standard condition wording associated with that. So one of the ideas that is discussed in the report is whether or not we should or may decide to develop a bit of a repository for holding those assessment reports ourselves. So right now, the process is that those reports are lodged with the ministry into their formal repository. But there is no spatial mapping with that. And as we've learned, it's sometimes difficult to get that information back out in the time frame that you need it. And so the City of Kingston, for example, has set that up. They've got a lodging bylaw in place that does require that those be submitted to the city as well as the ministry so that they maintain their own database of all those reports. And I think that could facilitate a future where you open the model under protected access and click on a prior site and pull up the report, right? So that we'd have that information at our fingertips. And so that really would support that type of framework if we are receiving those reports back directly. So I think that's great foreshadowing. I suspect those standards conditions may include something along those lines that where that's required, we'd ask for those back.
Follow-up?
Yes, just one follow-up then. So it comes down to who paid for the study. And if it's not a subdivision or a developer and it's a private landowner, can we obligate them to share the results of the study beyond such that the Indigenous agency is satisfied and we can proceed? I've met the condition and
okay, and through you, Madam Warden. So I think, so my understanding is that in completing that assessment in consideration to the standards and guidelines under that archaeological framework, that archaeologist would be required to submit that to the province. So it wouldn't be just a necessarily private study for their own reference. But you're right, we could be asking to also obtain a copy of those. And I see Holly's on there as well, so that might be one where I would tag Holly in as well, Madam Warden, if that's okay.
Okay, Ms. Martell, if you're there, if you would like to add.
I can just clarify that process. So archaeological assessments have to be done by a licensed archaeologist. So archaeologists are licensed to undertake the work. As part of their licensing requirements, they must file a report with the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism. It goes into a provincial register of archaeological reports, which is a public register of reports. Certain sections of the reports are not publicly available, but those are always subject and can be acquired under FIPO requests. So there is a public repository. It just can be challenging to get the information out of that. In terms of, can you obligate someone to submit directly to Grey County? I'm not sure that you can. The information can be accessible, but noting that it is accessible at the provincial level regardless. So.
Okay, thank you. So now I'll go back over to Councillor McQueen.
Thank you, Madam Warden. So I think one thing I think will have to be explained is what is a stage one archaeological study and what does that include? Because what I understand is, from my little experience with regards to aggregate, is you have to plow the field. That's stage one. So if you're doing is that not? I don't know. Because and then I thought from stage two, then it's a further in depth if they find something. But from my experience, if stage one is plow the field, disc it, and then they wait for a rain, and then anything shows up. So if you're going to a surplus farm dwelling or creating a severance, that means you're going to have to plow up the whole person's lawn to sever the house off from the farm. So then if it's about severance or about zoning, then from the agricultural side, does that mean every building that's being required is going to have to do one? Because what's the difference between a severance is to build a new house or a surplus farm dwelling? House is already there. But if it's requiring a cattle barn, so I think in the sense of this goes back to Green and Gray and the corridors across Grey County, a lot of input was supplied from the agricultural side on what's happening and how it's affecting the land, especially the agricultural side. So there's a lot of stuff here. And if it's required across, then I think we need to communicate that to our residents and the agricultural side especially, but nothing to do with if it's in regards to the severance. Well, probably the severance is because somebody's going to build a house. So, but if you're building a cattle barn, you're not doing a severance, you're still disturbing. So, I mean, you're going to have 100 acres of corn that's get disturbed every year. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here. And I think it's confusing to a lot of people. That's the requirement that you're going to make. And then I think my other comment, going back to Councillor Craig, is about liability. Well, if it's not being required, can we not as a county say, okay, you have to, developer A, you have to sign this to say it's up to you if you want to do one, but if you don't want to do it, the county's not liable. There's ways of doing that as well. So, so I think there's a lot of stuff here and for the report, but I think we better start communicating with a lot of different people on before this gets too far down the road.
Okay, so Ms. Buckton, did you want to talk about the communications you've been having and the input that you've been gathering, and we'll see who else would like to add something.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. You're right. It's very complicated. There's lots of pieces that are tied up together there. So I do think I'll maybe make a few remarks, and I think it might be advantageous just to have Dr. Martell give a brief overview of the stages of assessment. So I think, I guess I wouldn't necessarily get too caught up by the surplus farm dwelling severance context in that example. Firstly, it's a historic schoolhouse. There could be some interest in relation just to that fact that the building itself and the site itself has some history. So I think maybe setting aside that particular example, what I would say is that, the Planning Act applications are often acting as the trigger. So we have our obligation as the county to administer that framework to ensure that we're meeting those policy obligations that are set out for us in the PPS. So that we're ensuring that early engagement, that we're making sure that we're not allowing for site alteration until disturbance, until those artifacts or resources have been protected. But I think we don't necessarily have a trigger at a building permit stage. So looking at that situation where, we've got an existing property, it's a farm, they've got rural zoning on it, that would facilitate a barn construction. I would suggest to you that the trigger is not a building permit, so they would definitely not be subject to an assessment requirement, just by virtue of the building permit application itself. If they are entering into the Planning Act application, that's where our policy obligations are triggered, and that's where that becomes then a requirement of the process for us to address any resources that are identified there. So there's some nuance in terms of what triggers the assessment and what the requirements then are. So certainly we can talk more about that. But I think just on that communications piece as well, yes, absolutely. I think there will be the requirement for lots of communication. I think firstly, we need to get the procedures sorted so that we really have an understanding of what we need to be communicating. So what applications do we expect will trigger those assessments? What tools do we have to scope them or leave them or defer them, put them as conditions, those kind of things. So all of that detail will work out through the policy and procedure process. Like I say, we'll be back and forth with everyone around this table and with the member municipal staff as well. So we really, really hope that that will be a very clear process, very clear about when the assessments are required, what's triggering them, and the stage to which that level of assessment needs to happen. But if that's okay with you, Madam Warden, I'd love to ask Dr. Mantell just to speak a little bit about that the stages of assessment, if she wouldn't mind.
Okay, we're going to hear from the consultants first, and then we'll go to your follow-up, Councillor McQueen. Go ahead.
Sure, I'll just give a very brief overview. So there are 4 stages to archaeological assessment. The stage 1 archaeological assessment is evaluation of archaeological potential. It's usually a desktop study where you gather the information from maps, historic material, look at registered archaeological sites, previous archaeological assessments, and then you evaluate if there's archaeological potential retained on the property or if there's any registered sites and things like that. Are there any archaeological concerns? If a property has archaeological potential, then a stage 2 is required. The stage 2 is a property survey. So we would go out and in the case of an agricultural field, it would have to be plowed and surveyed, look for archaeological sites. If it's a non-plowable area, it would be test pitted, shovel test pitting, excavation of small holes, and we screen the soil and look for artifacts. If a site is found, then a stage 3 archaeological assessment is triggered for any findings that are of cultural heritage value or interest out of stage 2. The stage 3 is further testing of the site. That might involve some additional background research, some targeted excavation to kind of collect a sample of material from the site, determine what it is, what it represents, what its age is, whether it's intact and has integrity or not. And based on provincial criteria, we would either say the site is sufficiently documented, has no further cultural heritage value or interest, and no assessment would be required, or if it meets kind of the threshold and criteria that the ministry establishes and is significant, then it requires a stage 4 mitigation, which can occur through either avoidance and protection over the long term, just ways to protect archaeological sites within green spaces, or it would be a full excavation and mitigation of impacts to those through full documentation.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go to the follow-up to Councillor McQueen, and I believe Councillor Nielsen has his hand up after that.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Thank you very, very much for explaining those stages. I think that helps a little bit in the sense of the severity of what we're talking about or to the stages of that. But if it's a planning act or a planning act or a planning application that triggers that, for a severance or for a surplus, or say a church. I guess the point is, so is it about the building part? Is it about the excavation of the soil and determining the new use where, again, if it was a farm that was proposed or a rural property that was proposed to be severed, you can build barns all over the place, hypothetically saying, but if once you make an application for a severance or say it's a commercial shop, that's the trigger. But you can also have ADUs on land that you don't need triggers. So there's not consistency here. Like, I mean, what are you trying, I understand what you're trying to achieve here, but I think that you have to find the balance, like certainly from a full-fledged subdivision, an aggregate operation, because you're completely removing everything from agriculture or from an aggregate, and certainly from a subdivision plan, everything's going to get moved and replaced, and it's sure you disturbing. I can understand that part, but I think on the other side is, if you're trying to preserve things, then instead of penalizing or making people or punitive, have it on the other side. If people find something, it's support it instead of saying, well, you have to do this. So I'll leave my comments to come back to the report, but I think sometimes it's easier with honey than a stick, but anyway.
Okay, thank you. Just before we move on to other council members, we're going to go to the CAO.
Thank you, Warden. And those are all great comments and questions, Councillor McQueen. And I think that's going to be a key part of the next steps, as to what does that policy and process look like? What are those triggers? If something is triggered, is there a scoped exercise as it relates to whatever development that's being proposed? Back to Dr. Martel, indicating if it's a plan of subdivision, it might be one level of scope. If it's something that's a consent or another thing, is that a trigger point? If it is, what does that look like in terms of process? And trying to find that balance of respecting that we want to continue to provide for those opportunities, but also make sure that we're working with our Indigenous communities and protecting any potential resources that might exist. Right now, also, there are triggers that are by default happening today on 100% of the lands, essentially, because we don't have any mapping that's in place. So for example, for a plan of subdivision, right now it's automatic that, because we don't have these mapping and policies and procedures in place, if you're proposing a plan of subdivision, automatically do an archaeological assessment, like to do in a minimum stage 1, stage 2. And so right now, without the information that we are going to have as part of this AMP process, which will provide more information for everyone that's involved in this process, and will provide clear, consistent policies and framework for us to all help navigate through and work with both the developers, proponents, landowners, as well as our Indigenous communities to navigate through this. Because as Dr. Martel has indicated, as Liz has indicated, it's complex. And so taking some of that complexity out and being clear and concise in terms of what that policy and process framework looks like is exactly what the next step process will be. And as Liz indicated, we'll be bringing that framework back to council for the discussion and having further engagement with folks in terms of that, what that process and policy might look like.
Councillor McQueen, I have 2 people who are now waiting in the queue. So
I support that. I think identifying where the areas that have interest makes sense, instead of just, everybody's got to do it. So I support that idea. If it's identified that around water courses, certain areas where that makes a lot of sense. You don't know what you don't know until you map it. So that makes sense.
okay, we're going to go to Councillor Nielsen, and then Councillor Mackey will be after Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you very much, Warden. Just a quick follow-up question to Dr. Martel's comments on the 4 stages. Does this map represent stage 1? So what I understood to you, like your desktop review of the maps, previous studies and everything, is that what this study is doing? And then theoretically, then any archaeological study we request of anybody would be a stage 2 or further?
Ms. Martel?
The exercise is very similar, but the AMP mapping is really just a planning tool to help trigger the archaeological assessments. What a stage 1, it'll say do a stage 1 archaeological assessment for sure, and usually followed by a stage 2 assessment. The stage 1 archaeological assessment is much more comprehensive to a specific land parcel. An AMP, we can only look at, the broad mapping layers. We can't kind of go detail into the land use history of a particular farm or a particular urban property or a particular sort of hydro corridor or something like that at an AMP level. So those subsequent studies that will be called for will look at that more closely for any particular property.
Okay, thank you. So with that, then we'll go to Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Warden. Good morning, County Council. If I'm reading the room properly, I think probably a lot of us are pretty hesitant about where this may go in the can of worms that we may open up with this. We've all got experiences. We've all have situations that just makes us shake our head. I can think about a minor variance on an applicant that wanted to raise his total height of his garage that was already existing, had been built on a previous gravel pit, and there was a request for an archaeological study. Now, we didn't follow through with it. That wasn't a condition of the minor variance. But if there'd been pushback, I'm not sure where that would have went. So that's why I'm leery. The only thing I've heard this morning that gives me a little bit of confidence, and just a minor bit, is our comments from the CEO that there may be exemptions. It may help with the exemptions. But this is, we're in the province, we're trying to reduce red tape. I'm not sure that this is going in that direction. The average assessment is going to cost someone just severing off a lot is going to cost them $5,000 to $10,000 if we require that assessment. So I really hope there's lots of exemptions in our final version, or it's going to be difficult to support. Thank you. I don't think there's a question.
Okay, so that's extra commentary. As we said, all of this commentary is being duly noted by staff as we move through next steps. So I'll just look then to see if there are any others. We'll go to Councillor Pringle next.
Yeah, thank you, Warden. Again, I want to echo on Councillor Mackey and also on the CAO's information there too. There's a lot here, and us in Georgian Bluffs aren't blessed with acres and acres of land to develop, and we could run into a real issue if we're going to add another layer of complications to get something accomplished. I'm by far not ever against working with our partners. That's what it's all about, and certainly look towards doing that. This report is for information. I'm going to take it as for information. The CAO gave me some good feedback there. There's a lot of stuff to go through here yet. We're a long way from being near the end ever on this. It's going to be a while yet, but yeah, as the Councillor Mackey mentioned there, we don't need to add another layer of red tape to getting something accomplished in what we got going on out there. And it is offered for information, and it's a great report. There's a lot of information there. So I just had a comment.
Ms. Buckton?
Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity just to comment there as well. I guess what I would just highlight, and Holly did mention it in her presentation as well, is that the obligations and responsibilities around these assessments already exist. So that obligation, it currently exists. That is our requirement to administer and protect those resources. So I think it's a very complex process, and we're trying to bring that into a more streamlined view so that it will be more nimble. We can support those stage ones with the good information that's been collected to make that a smoother process, trying to get this earlier in the process as well, so that we're not into the middle of a project when we're dealing with these matters. But I think that point is probably the one that I would leave at this juncture. It's just that we already are responsible in this regard. And I'll just highlight, I see Scott there as well, as perhaps he has some further comments there too.
Director Taylor?
I heard some stomachs rumbling, so thank you. Through you, Madam Warden. Yeah, just to build on what Liz has shared and Dr. Martello shared and the CAO, we're very, very cognizant of this provincial government and past provincial governments' efforts to streamline the planning process. And Liz and Dr. Martello both mentioned the provincial or the obligations already in this regard. The one further thing I'll note that Dr. Martello also shared is that This actually is a recommendation from the provincial planning statement passed by the Conservative government that counties and municipalities undertake these management plans. The hope is through these management plans, it will further streamline the planning and archaeological processes and if you like, demystify some of the current challenges. No doubt, will there be requirements for archaeological assessments that landowners don't love? Yes. But I think similar to the CAO's comments, with more information, then staff can make more informed recommendations, and at the end of the day, help inform council. And there are going to be those ones where maybe based on paper, yes, an archaeological assessment is recommended, but based on practical application, if the site is already heavily disturbed or if they're not changing anything, maybe there will be those opportunities for other exemption or saying, well, listen, we understand what the requirements say, but here's why it may or may not be feasible in this regard. I will say, as part of this process, the other real benefit to county planning staff has been the increased relationship building with our Indigenous communities. And the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, just as they did for Bruce County's archaeological management plan, has been with us from day one, supporting us, offering in-kind services to try to advance the knowledge across the territory on this. So if nothing else, I think we forged a stronger bond with some of our Indigenous communities, and also Liz mentioned the Black descendant communities. So there's been lots of positive takeaways there as well.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Councillor Dobreen.
Thank you. And through you, is it possible to call it anything other than AMP? We already have an asset management plan. Now we're talking about AMP.
I don't know. Do you have a comment on that, Ms. Moncton? Okay. That's right. And I think spell check probably got you and converted it to AMO as well. That's right. Just because we use that terminology for the Association of Municipalities of Ontario for those who are following along. Okay. Any other further comments to receive this for information? Okay. I'm not seeing any further hands up, so I'll call the question then. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Okay, thank you, Ms. Buckton. Thank you to our consultants who have been with us online all this morning. We appreciate all of the efforts and the information you've been able to share. Thank you very much. Okay, so we do have more items for discussion. And lunch has arrived, but it's too much of a gamble with the number of items that still require some discussion. So what we will do at this point in time is we will call a break. We're going to request the presence of the committee, the whole members down in the stairwell for the arranged photo. We will have our lunch, and then Madam Clerk, what time can we expect to be back? Okay, so the request would be is that we're back at 12:45 to deal with the remaining items for discussion. So with that, we'll turn off our mics and we'll see everyone downstairs. That's right. Yes. Yeah. Photo first before you spill. Thank you very much. So we've now concluded our break and we are going to continue with our agenda, and we are on agenda 7B, item 7B. It's recommended that the report PDR CW 4925 be received and that all written and oral submissions on official plan amendment number 21 were considered and helped to make an informed recommendation and decision, and that proposed county official plan amendment number 21 on lands legally described as part of Lot 75, Concession B, being Part 1, Reference Plan 17R531, Geographic Township of Normanby, now in the municipality of West Gray, be approved to redesignate the lands from rural with exceptions and hazard lands to space extensive industrial and commercial with site-specific exceptions, rural and hazard lands, and that a bylaw to adopt the county official plan amendment be prepared for consideration by county council. May I ask for a mover? It's moved by Councillor Dickard and seconded by Councillor Keaveney. So it's now on the floor for discussion. So with that, I would like to look to our planner, Mr. McMurdy, who is going to come forward with the presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Derek McMurdy, and I'm the county planner assigned to this file, OPA 21 Martin. So the proposed county official plan amendment would redesignate the lands from rural with exceptions, rural and hazard lands to space extensive industrial and commercial with exceptions, rural and hazard lands. And this would permit an expanded outdoor storage area of 2,283 square meters for the existing feed storage manufacturing business on the property. Pre-submission consultation between the consultant, the municipality, and the county identified the submission requirements, and the required reports were submitted in support of the applications. A zoning bylaw amendment was also required by the municipality of West Gray and has since been approved, subject to OPA 21 being approved. A joint public meeting was held to discuss both the OPA and the ZBA on February 18th, 2025. The subject property is located on Highway 89, just west of the intersection of Gray Road 6 and Highway 89, and is about 2 kilometers west of Mount Forest. The subject property is located within the rural designation and contains an existing on-farm diversified use, which predates the county's current on-farm diversified use policies. The on-farm diversified use was permitted through OPA 138. The subject property is approximately 12.2 hectares in size and contains a single residential dwelling and on-farm diversified use and a barn, and is primarily used for farming purposes. The subject property is surrounded by low-density rural residential lands and active farmland to the south and east, low-density rural residential and forested lands to the west, and active farmland to the south, or to the north side. OPA 21 will amend section 5.74 of the county's official plan with a site-specific amendment and redesignate a portion of the lands from rural with exceptions, rural and hazard lands to space extensive industrial and commercial with exceptions, rural and hazard lands to permit an outdoor storage area that would otherwise exceed the county's official plan on-farm diversified use size policies. As mentioned previously, in 2017, OPA 138 was approved and permitted a metal fabrication shop. This was done prior to the county's current on-farm diversified use policies. I would also note that OPA 21 would remove and replace OPA 138. The proposed OPA would not change the use of the lands or expand the existing 557.4 square meter shop. The outdoor storage space will increase, however, from 442.6 square meters to 2,283 square meters. This larger storage space will expand or extend towards the rear of the commercial area away from the highway and neighboring properties. The remaining 11.63 hectares of the property would continue to be used for agricultural purposes. The applicant is also proposing to alter a farm drainage channel to redesignate a portion of the hazard lands on the property, to which positive comments have been received by SVCA. The zoning bylaw amendment would rezone the business lands from rural with exception and natural environment to rural industrial with exceptions. Here is a map of the portion of the property to be redesignated. I would note that the schedule included in the draft bylaw and in this presentation will be corrected before the bylaw appears before council. The portions of the hazard land that would be redesignated are inverse of what is shown on the schedule. As the hazard lands not within the red outline would be redesignated to rural, and the lands or the hazard lands within the red outline would remain as hazard lands. The municipality of West Grey, County of Wellington, and the historic Saugeen Métis provided comments indicating no concerns. The Saugeen Ojibwe Nation had required an archaeological assessment be completed, to which a stage 1 and stage 2 assessment was completed to the satisfaction of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation and found no archaeological resources on the property. The Ministry of Transportation provided comments focusing on the permits required to modify the entrance and other requirements such as setbacks from the highway, and no comments were received from members of the public or during the public meeting. The 2024 PPS provides direction on land uses and economic growth within rural areas and rural land within municipalities. The PPS does permit a variety of OFDUs within rural areas. However, the OFDUs must be limited in scale to the size requirements set out by the municipality. As stated previously, the existing OFDU exceeds these size requirements as is permitted before the county's OFDU size policies existed. While portions of the land would be redesignated as space extensive, industrial and commercial, the use of the property would not change, nor would the size of the shop building on the site. The intensity of the use would generally remain consistent with the requirements of OFDUs, except that a larger outdoor storage area is required. As for the county official plan, the subject lands are designated as rural with exceptions, and hazard lands on Schedule A. Schedule B indicates that the subject lands contain aggregate resource area, as the proposal will only extend an outdoor storage area and no new permanent structures or sensitive receptors would be created. County staff don't anticipate that any future extraction of aggregate material on the subject land or surrounding lands would be significantly impacted by the proposed use. From an ecological perspective, the property contains or is adjacent to a stream, river, significant woodland, significant valley lands, significant wildlife habitat, potential habitat for threatened and endangered species, and fish habitat. County planning and ecology staff determined that an environmental impact study would not be required as the proposed development would be located on previously disturbed and cleared lands. Lastly, the subject lands are not covered by the West Grey official plan, which only covers Durham and Newstead. Based on all of this, the proposed development is generally consistent with the PPS and generally conforms to the goals and objectives of the county official plan. As stated previously, county planning staff believe that the proposed development is better suited as a space extensive use rather than a site-specific on-farm diversified use for a variety of context-specific reasons. To start, the OFDU is existing, and if it were to be proposed today, it would not be permitted as it would not meet the county's OFDU size requirements. If the proposed development is approved, it would occupy approximately 4.9% of the subject property. This would be more than double the permitted size of a new OFDU on the property. The last reason is that the proposed development meets the criteria listed in the county official plan for establishing new space extensive uses. The criteria includes that uses require an accessible site, serves demand from highway traffic, requires a large outdoor storage area, parking area, or a large single single purpose building, and due to the storage area or building volume requirements would not be feasible within a settlement area. The proposed use would be located on Highway 89, which would provide easy access to the site, easily serve highway traffic, and provide a direct truck route. It would also require a larger outdoor storage area, and that if it were to be located in a settlement area, it would occupy a large portion of that settlement area that may be better suited for other forms of development. It is also noted that the entire use would be dry in nature and would not require access to municipal water and sewer services. So staff are recommending that the report PDR CW 4925 be received, that all written and oral submissions on official plan amendment number 21 were considered and helped make an informed recommendation and decision. and that proposed county official plan amendment number 21 on land legally described as part of lot 75, section B being part 1 reference plan 17R531, in the geographic township of Normanby, now in the municipality of West Gray, be approved to redesignate the lands from rural with exceptions and hazard lands to space extensive industrial and commercial with site-specific exceptions, rural and hazard lands. And a bylaw to adopt the county official plan amendment be prepared for consideration by county council. That concludes my presentation, and thank you. I'm glad to take any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you very much for those details. So we'll put it out to committee of the whole members for questions. We'll begin with Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you very much, Warden. One question popped in my head after our previous conversation today. The official plan amendment goes in, the official plan states specific exemptions, but then the property gets zoned. Zoning allows for, you can go for building permits, provided it meets the zoning, and you don't have to go for a plan amendment or anything like that. Does the zone change, the change in the zone allow for more than what they're applying for today? In other words, in the future, could they apply for an expansion on the shop because the zoning has changed to allow for that without the need to go back through the planning files? Just kind of wondering the further implications, my apologies, of this type of zone on the property, because once it's zoned forever.
That's a good question through the chair or warden. I'd have to look into that more. I'm not completely familiar with the requirements set out in the zoning bylaw. But in terms of the redesignate as a space extensive use, those site-specific exceptions for it would limit the permitted uses to ones that are generally permitted as on-farm diversified uses. And like I said, I'd have to look through the zoning bylaw that was approved and see if there's exact size requirement listed in there. But as I said, it also would exceed the currently permitted OFD size requirements. And so unless it's specifically stated in that zoning bylaw, they would then have to
follow up.
Thank you, Warden, and my apologies, everybody. I'm thinking like if they were to do a storage facility. So right now it's open storage, but they want to build a storage facility and then that ends up getting converted and changed. I'm just wondering that implication. So I appreciate the fact that this is a question that was sprung on you because I didn't think about it until earlier conversation about how zoning and building permits and such may affect other documents that are needed. But thank you very much for the response.
Okay, I'm looking around the chamber then to see if there are other questions. And we'll go to Councillor Dobreen.
Thank you, Warden, and through you, and thank you for the very thorough report. Not very clear on special space extensive industrial and commercial designations. It's the first time I've heard of it, but I'm always eager to learn. 4.9% being significantly greater than the 2% allowed. And another, is this a get around the provincial policy statement that allows up to 2% for on-farm diversified uses? And what we're seeing is requests for, expansion beyond that, called, expansion creep. I have concerns to Councillor Nielsen's point is what does this open up down the road for it or other on-farm diversified uses? I'm not supportive of it on its merits right now because it's so significant.
Okay, it looks like Director Taylor is going to respond.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councillor Dobreen. Through you, Madam Warden, and Derek, feel free to tag in at the end here. Generally speaking, the on-farm diversified use policies in the provincial planning statement refer specifically or pertain specifically to prime agricultural areas. And the intent there is to limit the amount of sort of non-farm development on those prime agricultural lands. In this case, the county has chosen to also apply those same policies to our rural designated lands. So these lands are designated rural currently. They're not prime ag. In the hopes of allowing for sort of a more diversified rural economy. That said, the provincial planning statement gives broader permissions for rural lands to go above and beyond those strict requirements of the on-farm diversified uses that are permitted in the prime agricultural areas. So in this case, county staff chatted about it, and we chatted with municipal staff and the proponent as well, to look at what the best fit here. We could look at a on-farm diversified use with exceptions type designation and zoning, or we could look at a space extensive. And space extensive is a designation that's been used across the county, particularly where we had uses across the countryside that were dry in nature, as Derek had said, and do require larger areas, often for outdoor storage. So, you know, a great example would be a business that's dealing in landscaping supplies, flagstones, everything else like that. They need a ton of space just to store all those materials, but they're not necessarily a use that needs to be on water and sewer, and not necessarily a use that needs to be in a traditional business park, if you like. And so this isn't certainly quite as space extensive as that, but in staff's opinion, we saw this as befitting a space extensive designation, probably more so than the on-farm diversified use, based on the need for the outdoor storage. But we're also cognizant of the fact that this official plan amendment and zoning, if approved, weren't going to take any further land out of production from an agricultural perspective. So I don't know, Derek, if you have anything further to add, but that's just a little bit of context.
Okay, anything further? No? Okay. So with that, I'll look around for any other hands. Not seeing any. Okay, so I think we've asked all of the questions. Thank you very much for that information in the presentation as well as your explanations. And with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, so moving to item 7C. It's recommended that report CAOR CW 2225, the Climate Change Initiatives Update, be received for information. May I ask for a mover and a seconder? We've got it moved by Councillor McKay, seconded by Councillor Pringle. It's now on the floor for discussion. Welcome, Ms. Swanston. She is going to come and introduce it along with the presentation.
Thank you, and good afternoon to members of council. So it's my pleasure today to provide you with an update on the work that has happened in the last year or so on our Going Green and Grey Climate Action Plan. Going Green and Grey is the plan that was approved in 2022, which lays out 21 community actions and 13 corporate actions to set Grey County on the path for net zero by 2050, while realizing community benefits to our economy, social well-being, and our natural environment. I want to stress that the report in front of you today is not a departmental annual report. It's not even a Grey County report. It's really a picture of the progress that's been achieved across our community through collaboration and really working together towards these goals. In front of you are two documents. One is the staff report and one is a sort of visual snapshot. Both try to provide a comprehensive update on implementation progress, both the activities that have been undertaken by Grey County as an organization, our member municipalities, and our community partners. Within the staff report, there is a detailed action level implementation table. And for our public reporting this year, we took a digital first strategy. So you may remember last year, there was a slightly longer document that came to you that outlined what we had achieved. What we've done this year is produce the pamphlet in front of you, which is really intended to invite our residents and stakeholders to visit our webpage, which I will show you briefly in a moment. One of the advantages of this is that it's a shorter printed document and allows us to provide more detailed layered information on the web page. So we wanted to really, at this point, a few years into implementing the plan, take stock of what we've managed to achieve. So in the staff report, you do see an action by action progress update. So across all 21 community actions and all 13 corporate actions, identifying partners that we're working with and progress that has been accomplished. In the snapshot that each of you have in front of you, as I mentioned, we went for this digital first strategy for a number of reasons. By producing a shorter PDF document, which is also available on our website, and instead providing the majority of the information on the web page, it's a more searchable format. It's also more accessible, and it also allows us to keep that information evergreen. So as additional work happens, we can add it to the website in a layered fashion. I'm going to test my technological prowess here. So within the web page, you have a link to the same PDF document that you have print copies of. And then, for example, here where we're talking about our corporate actions, you have hyperlinks to more information about the work that we're doing. And then across the themes of the Going Green and Gray plan, there are drop-down accordions, again, providing links and photos beyond what we would be able to capture in a printed or PDF document. So now that I've told you a little bit about how we're telling the story, I'll tell you a little bit about some of the great work that we've been able to accomplish, again, community and corporate wide. So one is funding success. So collectively across Grey County organization, we have been able to secure $12.9 million in external funding. I need to be very clear that the vast majority of that, $9.5 million, is for a regional transit network. That is not directly the work of the climate action team, but certainly having low carbon mobility options for our residents is an important part of the Going Green and Gray plan. More directly within the purview of the climate initiatives team, we are, as a regional partnership, able to secure $2.5 million in funding for public electric vehicle chargers, nearly $450,000 in support of the Future Ready Green Development Program, $130,000 to support climate adaptation, $90,000 to make Grey County buildings more efficient. Those are just a few of the highlights, and there is a detailed list of the funding within the staff report. As I mentioned, this really is a community plan. We work with over 40 community partners in terms of advancing these objectives. They range from conservation authorities to nonprofits to higher education to the health sector to Indigenous organizations. So we really are trying as a county to act as a catalyst and an enabler as much as an action taker. And of course, our most important partners are our local and regional municipalities, all of whom are profiled in these documents and essential elements of advancing this work. In terms of leading by example, so activities Grey County is undertaking ourselves, we are striving for any new construction to build to a net zero ready standard. So that includes our Rockwood Terrace long-term care home redevelopment project, as well as a number of our paramedic bases. We've received federal funding to install 20 EV fleet chargers for our own vehicles, and we'll be piloting 2 light-duty electric vehicles this year. We were able to engage 10 departments internally in our first ever workplace sustainability challenge, and have also, as is illustrated in the picture on the slide, in the last year had 4 work bees with over 40 volunteers to continue the naturalization of the property that we're meeting on today. We also continue, as I said, in an effort to be an enabler to meet regularly with our 9 member municipalities and 10 public sector organizations through our community of practice model, which enables information sharing and collaboration. Nature-based solutions in agriculture, one of the things that really sets the Going Green and Gray plan apart is its grounding in our local and regional landscape. We really center the importance of nature-based and agricultural solutions to climate action. And as part of that, have funded 13 local farms across 2024 and 2025, covering in the last couple of years, currently in the 2025 year, 265 acres of agricultural land to pilot different sustainable approaches. We're promoting local producers through the Gather initiative cross-corporately, as well as cross-corporately promoting the Living Snow Fence program, which supports the planting of trees to reduce blowing snow in the winter. And we're also updating and developing a number of our planning policies, including the ecological replacement and enhancement policy and the forest management bylaw, all in an effort to advance nature-based climate solutions. Waste management is clearly the purview of our member municipalities. We do convene a waste management community of practice where regularly staff share best practices, and across Bray we see major advances in this area, with 4 municipalities having organics and green bin collection, including Owen Sound recently launching theirs. 400 food cyclers, so countertop composting units, having been distributed in 2 municipalities. 6 municipalities having reuse centers or similar types of initiatives, and 4 community repair cafes. So you'll see residents sharing their expertise on how to fix a broken toaster, or what you might be able to do to keep a small appliance operational. In terms of EVs, transit and active transportation, in addition to the 9.5 million in transit funding, the breakdown of that 2.5 million for a regional fast charging network includes 600,000 directly flowing into Grey County for 3 fast electric vehicle chargers. Already 6 local municipalities have 1 or more electric or hybrid vehicles within their fleets. And we see the updating of the county's paved shoulder policy to support active transportation and recreation, as well as a share the road. I'm just going to keep going. A share the road signage, an update to a cycling map and media campaign to try and encourage all road users to share the roads together. In terms of building and development, the Future Ready program is well underway. We'll be giving you a more fulsome update at the August council meeting, but we continue to collaborate with Dufferin and Wellington counties to really advance an effort to support our regional development and construction industries in building for the future, being prepared for future building requirements from the federal government, and providing our residents with residential construction that is efficient and meets the future needs. There are a number of retrofit programs being offered at this time by the provincial government and utilities, and so we continue to promote those out to our residents to support them in accessing them. Climate adaptation, you've heard about quite recently. We've completed our Resilient Grey engagement process. This was quite innovative. We ran some of Grey County's first Spotify ads to invite people to complete a survey. We engaged with we had 585 engagements where we touched various community events, as well as inviting residents to host their own conversations. There is an advisory group who, again, is multi-sectoral. So I want to sort of, I guess, stress in the climate adaptation space, there's both light touch engagements where maybe a resident talks to us for 5 minutes and learns something, and then we're actually able to mobilize the commitment of community stakeholders like the conservation authorities, United Way, the utilities, who are actually giving us days of their time to support us in coming up with a Resilient Grey plan. We are updating technical guidance within the planning department around stormwater management and erosion control. We also continue to collaborate with municipalities and conservation authorities to align hazard mapping and municipal mapping. So all trying to help us be a resilient Grey community. The final theme I'll speak to is outreach and engagement. We do continue on a one-on-one resident basis to try and help build capacity. We've attended over 38 events within the last year. We have a sort of monthly-ish e-newsletter that goes out. There's been a 58% growth in subscribers to over 500. We've been deeply involved in various youth climate action efforts, including the 3rd annual Youth Climate Action Conference back in November, where 130 students attended from 27 regional schools. We're also supporting the work of the Town of the Blue Mountains and their Youth Climate Action Fund that's distributed over $117,000 in micro grants to 20 youth-led projects. And that's not everything, but I hope those are some of the highlights, some of the things that we're most excited about. This is a screenshot of one of the panels in the print document. So I spoke mostly about things that Grey County is doing, but I do really want to emphasize that this is about catalyzing and working with our member municipalities as well. So through our municipal community of practice, we reached out to the CAOs and sort of asked them to flag some of the things happening locally that they thought it would be good to profile. In terms of next steps, we are going to continue to identify opportunities to support investments in long-term sustainability, and particularly external funding that we may be able to leverage to advance council's goals while building strategic partnerships and capacity internally for this kind of work. So a huge thank you to everyone around this table, as well as our community and the work that we've been able to accomplish. And also, of course, to the Climate Initiatives team who did a lot of the legwork in pulling this report together, including Megan, who's here today. Yes, so thank you very much for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. And it is lovely to see that document as well. That will be good for us to be able to share the news in our municipalities. So with that, then I will just take a moment here. We'll get the screen back. I'll look around the room for any questions. And we'll go to Councillor Dobreen.
Thank you. And through you, thank you very much. Beautifully done. And it leads you, if you have the capability and the interest to go to the website, then it encourages you to do so. Excuse me. I guess my question is threefold. You mentioned on one of your pages, one of your slides, the waste diversion, and you talked about the number of municipalities that have organics, reuse centers, EV charging stations. Is there a potential for that to be mapped so that people can have a visual? I didn't notice it, but I admit I haven't been to the website yet. And in our climate, given our most recent climate, winter, I can see the benefit of hybrid vehicles. I'm curious as to, with all of the charging stations or the charging infrastructure that we've gotten funding for, are we tracking how they're being used, like the frequency? I see, banks of charging stations in other municipalities empty, more times than they have even one vehicle. I just wondered if that is being tracked. Thank you.
Thank you for the question and through you, Madam Warden. I think we could map. Some of those assets are maybe already being mapped elsewhere. There is a sustainability assets map that Grey County hosts, and we can certainly look at including things like which municipalities have different diversion programs available. For EVs specifically, because so many, because I'm not an EV owner, but from talking to EV owners, you really want a comprehensive map of all charging opportunities, not maps of specific networks of charging opportunities. So we tend to rely on third-party mappers of EVs because they are able to keep them current. In terms of the funding that Grey County has received, we're in the process of installing those chargers. So certainly once they are installed, we will be tracking usage. And yeah, I think it's something we know other municipalities certainly are keeping that information for their chargers. So we'll be doing the same.
Okay, thank you. Looking around the room. Okay, I'm not seeing any further hands up. So in that case, then thank you very much for providing us that update and for the document that we can share. And I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you. And we have one more then that needs discussion, 7D. And we are revisiting this information with extra information included. So the recommendation is that report EDC. Okay, so Madam Clerk, I just want to check with you too, because we did have an originally moved motion. So do you want to speak?
So we did have a motion that was deferred from a prior meeting to be brought forward to a future meeting. So it was originally moved by Councillors Carlton and Patterson. But to get it back on the floor, if council could put forward, move and second it again and put the original motion back on the floor, and then we can proceed from there.
Okay, so you would like me to read out the recommended motion and then see if Councillor Carlton and Councillor Patterson are still moving that motion? Okay. All right, so with that, it's recommended that report EDTC CW 0625 regarding Grey Roots Village unanticipated capital projects 2025 be received, and that the schoolhouse portion of the 2027 Cedar Shingle capital project be advanced to 2025 due to failed inspection, that the schoolhouse roof replacement be funded from a combination of year-end surplus and Grey Roots Morston Village building improvements reserved. So, Councillor Carlton, that it continues to be what you would move? Okay, and Councillor Patterson? Okay, so I'm seeing a nod of head from both the mover and the second, Madam Clerk. So we have that now on the floor to pick up the conversation now. So welcome, Director Myers, if you would like to present the updated information.
Thank you. Good afternoon, County Council. So thank you to Tara for taking us through that, because that was the first part of my notes here, was just to say that this is based on the deferral from the last meeting that we had. We went back and gathered more information as you had requested about different roofing material options. We did this in mind, thinking about the building's historic character, longevity, maintenance requirements, all of those pieces, a lot of similarities to what we talked about yesterday during Budget and Finance Committee and the maintenance requirements within our department. As you'll see in here, it is still the same recommendation from before because this is a deferral. But in going back to do further research about what other options may have been available, you will see that in the report where asphalt shingles, sheet metal shingles, and slate shingles were also options in addition to the cedar roofs. You see a chart on page 2 of the report that talks about what we know as a preliminary estimate. I say it's a preliminary estimate because no matter what, we still have to go and do an RFQ process. I still need to go out formally through purchasing to do the quotes because everything's over $20,000. So this is our best estimate right now, having not gone through that process. So we also provided some comments so that you would know what was available during that period, what was not, what was likely to have been used, as well as the pricing that we know to date and life expectancy. And the life expectancy is something that to us is really important. The maintenance requirements is really important. As again, we discussed yesterday during Budget and Finance, we are really spending a lot of time on maintenance, a lot of money on maintenance, and that is what drives our capital budget. So we're trying to find a solution that will give us the most life expectancy, but still dollar figure so that we are investing wisely as we go. So knowing that, what we would like to recommend as an alternative suggestion, if the cedar shingles are still not preferred, is the Euro Shield. So what we have found is it's a highly durable recycled rubber shingle roofing material. It provides a modern alternative with at least a 50-year estimated lifespan on it. So it is a composite material, but it looks very similar to red cedar shakes. Given that life expectancy, it equates to approximately $1,036 over every single year in terms of an investment. The other thing that we wanted to note, thinking about our maintenance and how our buildings age, is that none of our buildings are heated and cooled throughout the year. They're not lived in, so they do tend to deteriorate faster because they're historic buildings. So we just wanted to make that note as well. So all of these figures that you see throughout here are based on kind of the worst case scenario of the lowest life expectancy possible. So asphalt being 15 years, where we would have to replace it twice over the course of the time limits of others. Our red cedar would last at least 30 years, could be 50, but we're estimating these numbers based on 30 years, and all of the rest of the options are 50-year assumptions based on what we know to date. So we are looking for council's direction in terms of where you are willing to go and where you want staff to go with the roof of the schoolhouse with this information now in hand. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you for that further information and comparison of the options. So we're going to go into discussion. So did I see a hand from Councillor Mackey, and then we'll go to the Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Warden.
Thank you, Savannah, for bringing that forward. I have some personal knowledge of the Euro Shield, and it's been installed on my mother's log house for about 15 years, and it looks the same today as it did the day it was installed. So I'm glad that that's the recommendation, and I would certainly support that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go over to the Deputy Warden.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Thank you, Savannah, for indulging council's request to go back and have another look at that. It looks like you've done a tremendous amount of work, and I appreciate that. And I too, I don't have any personal experience with the Euro Shield, but I think it checks off a number of the boxes, and especially after yesterday's budget and finance meeting, where we talked about maintenance and operational expenses killing our budgets. Something that is recycled, something that is long lasting, and something that looks good. Boy, that really hits the spot. So thank you so much for that. I couldn't help but think, and I talked to Savannah during lunch a little bit about it. Back in the 1920s, when trustees really did the work of a trustee, they probably were wondering, what are we going to put on the roof of this old school or this schoolhouse? It wouldn't be old in those days, but they'd be looking at a barn sheet steel. They wouldn't be concerned about, does it look like a barn roof? Well, yeah, it does, but it's going to last for, well, the steel's been on my barn for excess of 100 years. And yeah, you need to paint it once in a while, but it lasts a long time. But the Euro Shield, I think that does the work. So thank you, Savannah.
Okay, thank you. And just, yes, it is one of the recommendations. It's noted as the secondary recommendation, the Euro Shield. So with that, we'll continue. So, oh, yes.
Just a point of order. Do we need an amendment to change the recommendation? Yes. So I will move that we amend the resolution or the motion to install the Euro Shield. Is that kind of what you're looking for, Madam Clerk, Madam Warden? Yeah, good. Thank you.
Yes, because the current one that's on the floor for discussion refers to the cedar shingle. So, okay, so that's been moved by the Deputy Warden as an amendment to the main motion. Is that being seconded by, that's being seconded by Councillor Dobreen. So we're now on the discussion, we've heard prior discussions, so we're now on the discussion of, can you just make sure that everybody can see it as well up on that screen? Okay, so we are now considering that it's been moved by Councillor Milne, seconded by Councillor Dobreen, that the motion be amended to strike out cedar shingle and insert Euro Shield in the second clause. So that is all that we're discussing at this point. So open for discussion. Yes, Councillor Dobreen.
Thank you. And through you, I am happy to second the motion. My question about next steps is that this would still go to an RFQ. We're specifically targeting Euro Shield, confident that it's going to be less than red cedar shingles. I'm guessing if it comes in significantly more than the original estimate, then it'll come back. But is this non-specific enough perhaps through the warden to the clerk? Is this get your job easier?
Okay, Director, you want to address that?
Thank you, through you, Warden. That was a great question. I'm hopeful that it doesn't come back as more than the shingles. I think given our purchasing policy, there are certain thresholds that if it comes back, I think it's 20% more than what you're approving. We need to come back to you regardless. If you wanted to leave it where we could do an actual process, I would have to check with Mary Lou and Mike where it is red cedar or Euro Shield and have them quote on both to see what comes. I don't know if that's an option, probably a messier option, but I mean, we're comfortable with the Euro Shield if council's comfortable with the Euro Shield.
Okay, well, the amendment we have is only specifically to the Euro Shield, so that'll have to stay that way unless we hear differently from council members. So, okay. All right, so I don't see any further discussion on the amendment. So I will call the vote then that the motion be amended to strike out cedar shingle and insert Euro Shield in the second clause. All those in favor? Okay, that motion is carried. So we will now just update our main motion with changing cedar shingle to EnviroShield. And I'm sorry, Director Myers, the number of suppliers of that particular brand name, you don't know. So, and could be anywhere in Ontario, could be bidding on it. Okay. Okay, all right. So we're back to the main motion. Is there any further discussion on the main motion? Oh, okay. Can we just have it updated on the screen, please? Okay, so now reads that report EDTC CW 0625 regarding Grey Roots Village unanticipated capital projects 2025 be received, and that the schoolhouse portion of the 2027 EuroShield capital project be advanced. Sorry, I'm just. Yeah, okay, be advanced, yes, due to failed inspection, but there was another part too as well, right? Okay, and that the school, yeah, and that the school had, there it is, further, just making sure it's on the screen for everybody to see. And that the schoolhouse roof replacement be funded from a combination of year-end surplus and Grey Roots Morriston Village Building Improvements Reserve. So all three sections are there for your review on the screen. Okay, I am seeing no further questions then, no further comments, so I'll call, oh, yes. Oh, sorry, Deputy Warden.
Just real quick, I will note that this is a Canadian product. It's manufactured in Calgary. I don't know if that was in the report or not, but it is. So elbows up, right on. Thank you.
Excellent, additional detail for sure. Okay, all right. Therefore, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All right, the motion's carried. How could we say no after the Deputy Warden's additional comment? Okay, thank you. So that takes care of that item. We do not have any closed meeting matters, other business. Seeing no hands raised. We'll then go to notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion to serve? Looking around the room. Not hearing or seeing any hands go up, then we'll call for a motion to adjourn. We'll recommend that this committee of the whole does now adjourn at 1:31 p.m. Moved by Councillor Eccles and seconded by Councillor Patterson. Any discussion? All those in favor?